Today we're talking about the 5 hobbies INFJs love but aren't aware of. Because one thing is for sure, INFJs are rare. And when there's something or somebody that's rare, you don't have a lot of role models. You don't have a lot of examples. So sometimes you don't even know that certain things are happening, that you have a thing that you're doing that's actually a hobby, because nobody's actually named it before. So today we're going to look into exactly that. The 5 hobbies that INFJs love but aren't aware of because they're just not that common. If you want to learn all the strategies that work wonders for INFJs, then get the new course, Financial Abundance for INFJs. I've worked with a lot of financially successful INFJs in my one-on-one coaching, and all of this has been the basis on creating that course for you that you voted for. So if you're ready to take the next leap in increasing your financial abundance, then either get the course through the link in the description or through the prompt in the video. Hobby number 1 that INFJs love but aren't aware of is observing other people experiencing their hobbies. So what do I mean by that? What I've experienced throughout the years while talking to so many INFJs is that we sort of feel like, oh, there's something that I want to go into. I'm really excited about it, but I sort of don't really feel like doing it. Like something is holding me back. For example, let's say you love to watch a YouTuber do music, or you love to watch a YouTuber talk about a certain topic, right? Let's say model trains, fashion, whatever it may be. It doesn't really matter. And you love to indulge yourself in that. You also indulge to watch your friends get into their hobbies, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you would want to do the same thing. We very often think, okay, I just don't have what it takes, or I'm holding myself back, when in reality, what we actually enjoy about this process is to observe. And as long as we are not becoming aware of that, we're always going to think that something is missing. I, for example, love to watch YouTube videos about fashion. That does not mean that I want to buy those things. For the longest time, I thought, okay, I need to get more into fashion. I need to start buying those things. And every single time I tried to do that, I recognized, well, that doesn't really excite me. What does excite me, though, is to observe them doing that, talking about that, living out all of those emotions. Because what the INFJ loves about this is to experience how others are feeling in that moment. That's a skill set, because that's a combination of our feeling side and of our intuitive side. So no matter who you're around, if it's friends, if it's, people that you watch online, if it's, just some kind of thing that you get excited about, really ask yourself, what is it that you experience in that moment? And most of the time you'll see it's not so much about wanting to be that person or wanting to do what that person does, but to be there and to experience the emotion that they're experiencing. Of course, this is all a personal interpretation. It is not to say that what we feel in that moment is exactly what that other person is feeling. But we have created a sort of guideline, a sort of rational system in our mind of how that person could experience that. But recognizing that, observing that, and then going deeper into that, that's something that we love to do. And it's about time that we name it as such, and that we stop asking ourselves, what is wrong with us? Why do we like observing how other people are doing it, but we don't feel like doing it ourselves? We don't feel like doing it ourselves because that's a different set of emotions. We're not about to experience some emotional thing through that hobby. We are experiencing something because we can look into that person. And that in itself is a hobby that INFJ loves, but most of the time isn't aware of. Hobby number 2 that INFJs love but aren't aware of is that we love to understand mysteries, no matter what it may be. An INFJ will probably not leave something at face value, not if we don't understand it. If we don't understand another person's behavior, if we don't understand why certain things work out and others don't. Things like this keep us, paralyzed. And it's not just, a habit. This is really a hobby because it's something that we will do over and over and over again. And if we're not aware of that this is actually a positive thing, that we can look at it as a hobby, we might go overboard and do it in situations that aren't healthy for us. How often have you been in a situation where you had an interaction with a person and they didn't act the way you thought they would? Right? You've had a great connection, and for some reason that person, is going their separate way. Or they get offended and you don't know what you did. What does the INFJ do at that moment? They try to understand. And there will probably be nothing that is going to keep you back from it until you find a solution of why this is going on. As I said, this can go extremely bad. This can go so overboard because what you're actually doing is you're going, even more introverted than you already are. We're using our first and our third function. This is the so-called dominant tertiary loop, so the NITI loop. And in that scenario, all you do is you try to absorb everything that you have, all the information available, and then make reason out of it. And we try to get this done better and better and better, although we don't have any new information that we could, put into our system. That's why I'm always saying we have to express ourselves. We have to start living more of, this is how I see the world. Because through that, you actually, create a new scenario, you get new information into your system, and you understand things much better. But if we understand that this can be a hobby, that this can be something exciting, that this doesn't have to be like this thing that you hold on to that makes you crazy, but that is something that can just be, a fun thing, a hobby. You can look at it much more lightheartedly. You can say, oh, I love to understand that. Let me go deeper into this. Let me try to understand how it works. Because the thing we want as INFJs is to understand the logic behind something. We want to understand how, multiplication works instead of learning by heart what 2 times 3 is. Because once we've learned how multiplication works, we can, use it to any kind of, scenario that we're in. And this is part of our unique, setup. And, once we understand that this is a hobby, this can be something that we do for fun, we can stop ourselves when it becomes unhealthy. We know, okay, I'm going to go into this, but, I know I'm going to stop. It's like, I love eating cake, but it doesn't mean I'm going to eat the entire thing or 2 or 3 or whatever it may be. The third hobby INFJs love that they aren't aware of is to start new. Very often, INFJs are a little bit frustrated with themselves because it seems like they start something and before they know it, they lose interest in that thing and they want to start something new. And very often, this is something that makes INFJ question, are they able to pull off anything ever? Because it seems like they can never stick with something long enough. But the truth is, what we need and what we love to do is to start new. That in itself is something that is a way of life, right? What we love to do is to look into the black box. Meaning, if we are put in a situation where a certain, scenario hasn't been built up yet, and we are the ones who can create something out of nothing, that is what we love. That is why an INFJ will probably be much happier at, let's say, a startup company where you can decide how you want to build that up than to be in a work environment where everything is so clear cut, every rule is very clear, and you have to play by those rules and you don't have any room to create something new. What we are good at is to create something with very few information available. That is where we excel in comparison to somebody else. Other people might need a lot of information, a lot of guidelines. We have the ability to use our intuition with what we have, the few amounts of information that are available to us and create something new. That is how we use our mind. That is how we prove to ourselves that we're good at something. And this is, as I said, the way we excel. And so you're naturally are going to be drawn to that. Doing something new, looking into a black box and creating logic out of nothing. Once you understand that this is something that you crave, something that you love, you can just implement that into your life as a hobby. As in, say, you decide to visit another city every other month, or you say, I'm going to look into different musical instruments from time to time. Whatever it may be. You know what's going to happen if you allow yourself to have those kind of hobbies? You'll actually get this need fulfilled. And with that, it's going to be that much easier to stick with something, although it's not something new all the time. But because you know that it just takes some consistent, work and, commitment in order to get something off the ground and get something the way you want. Right? We're not going to have our hobby be a problem. We're just going to make sure that we fulfill that need, that we fulfill that urge for novelty, And that way, in those other areas where we have to, do the things that are not so exciting, it's not so hard for us because it's not really keeping us from having that other need met, which is, the novelty, the excitement, looking into the black box. And that's when we get to hobby number 4. That is very much connected to this, and that is optimizing. Optimizing in a way of how can I create the maximum result with the minimum effort I put in. Again, this is a love for optimization. This could be a hobby. This is something that we do all the time, but if we're not really defining it as a hobby and we're not really applying it that way, we're probably not doing things that are in our biggest favor. So let me explain this. No matter where you're at, you are probably going to look at the situation in the following way. Okay, that's all I can get out of the situation. Let's say you're at a job and no matter how much I put in, I cannot, have a promotion within a year or so. It's just not possible. I can, give 150%, I can give 60%. It's not going to make a difference. And what we're really good at is understanding that and then saying, okay, I'm going to do the least amount possible to create the maximum, that I can get out of that situation. That is a smart move to begin with. First off, it just saves energy in places where we shouldn't, exert our energy, so we can use it in other places. And at the same time, we have enough energy left to put it into areas that might benefit us. The problem with this is that if we don't approach this consciously, we choose life circumstances that aren't, the best we could actually have, because we put ourselves in situations where we say, okay, I want to, put out the least amount of effort possible. And this is the best I can get out of that situation. The alternative would be to go somewhere where you have to give your best in order to sort of make it by. And we will always choose the first step because we love the process of optimization. This is how our mind works. But again, if you look at it consciously and you recognize I'm great at optimizing, that's how my INFJ mind works. It's all about understanding what is available to me and how can I make the best out of it. If we use it this way, we can apply this to optimizing our life, as in how can I do the bare minimum in my life in order to create the best outcome. It's a whole different thing than saying, okay, I have a job and that's where I apply the least amount of effort necessary to get the best out of this situation. No, we're looking at it more holistically, as in how can I get the best out of life. I always say we as INFJs, we don't have to do all the things. We just have to do the right things. We're not the greatest at, SE as an extroverted sensing, taking action, but we don't have to be. What we're good at is understanding how we can set up our life and then just take the steps necessary to make everything happen the way we want. And that will include that you will choose areas where you don't do the bare minimum, where you say, I'm going to do the most I can possibly do in this area. And because of that, I will feel more excitement in my life. But in order to do this, we have to understand that it's not about, doing this hobby of ours, which it is in the end. It's an excitement. It's something that we do on a regular basis. We're not going to do this subconsciously and, doing it in such a way that we can barely keep our head above water. No, we're going to start thriving. And in order to do that, we need to find hobbies where we can, optimize. And one of those great hobbies is to optimize our life. So make this as one of your great adventures. That's what I love about being an INFJ. I plan my life. I optimize it. I think of it as a strategic game. And if you do that, then you won't need to apply this, tendency of yours into the certain tasks that you're doing. You're actually wanting to put as much into that as you possibly can because you're already fulfilling this urge of optimization throughout the holistic approach of your life. And the fifth hobby that INFJs love but aren't aware of is rebelling. You have to be aware of that. The INFJ loves to walk the path not traveled. That is something that is just the way we work. It has a lot to do with this aspect of looking into the black box and understanding that because you as an INFJ not only have the capacity to understand certain situations when there isn't enough information there, but you are psychologically built in such a way that it doesn't bother you to be on your own path. For a lot of types, it is difficult because if they don't have this factor of my neighbor is doing the exact same thing or the people around me, and I would just choose this path least traveled and go for a life that is out of the ordinary, I would feel abandoned because social inclusion needs and all other needs that are connected with that are such a strong force for so many personality types that, they can't break out of the normal scenario. But you as an INFJ have the capacity to do that much easier because our mind doesn't feel like something is missing. The way we're set up, we already think so differently than most people that it's not so difficult for us to, then actually take steps that are out of the ordinary. So this rebellious streak is just part of what we love to do. It's our hobby. And if we look at it this way and we, apply it consciously, we're not going to rebel by, getting into relationships that have no future, choosing some paths where, the chances for excitement and happiness and success are very low just in order to fulfill this need of rebellion. No, we're going to use this need for rebellion in a positive way by saying, I'm going to keep it safe in the areas that give me stability. So I'm going to make sure I have people around me that make me feel, safe and seen and protected. And the rebellious part of me, I'm going to use that in order to, go out into the world and do things that, most people don't dare to do. I'm going to keep it safe in my wealth management. I'm going to keep it safe in my relationships. I'm going to keep it safe in my energy. But there has to be a part of me, probably in the parts of your vocation. So allow yourself to look at rebellion as a hobby, as something that you consciously do and you decide in what areas you're going to be rebellious. And trust me, if you are going beyond what is normal in a certain area, for example, in your vocation, as in saying, okay, that's how I express myself, that's how I live my gifts out, whatever it may be, you're much more likely to make healthier choices in areas where it's probably better not to be rebellious. Remember, if you want to get all the strategies, all the lessons learned that I have gathered throughout my life and also working with a lot of financially successful INFJs, then get the video course on financial abundance for INFJs. It's created specifically for you after you voted for it. You can get it through the link in the description or through the prompt in the video. And if you want to watch another video now that is in alignment with today's topic, then watch the 5 weirdest habits of the INFJ.